Games aren't won on paper, but until Monday night, that's all we got. Let's break it down. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis based on your participation, your contribution. Please like the video and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. The reason to do that is we go live constantly. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Michigan, Washington, Wolverines on a quest to win a first national championship at that school since 1997. For Washington, you got to go back to 1991. How do they match up on paper? Let's look at the stats, and we're not just going to break down positional unit versus positional unit. Okay, Michigan's number 3 at this position, and Washington's defense is number 76 at this position, so check one off for the Wolverines. But let's break it down in regards to the best units that each one of these two teams have faced this season in those particular categories, and how Washington and how Michigan have performed against the best on their schedule. Let's look at the rushing offense for Michigan. Blake Corum scored 25 touchdowns this year, 4.7 yards per carry. That is significant in that, although that's a good season, it's not the 5.9 yards per carry. The Michigan rushing attack, not what it was in 2022. Donovan Edwards at 7.1 yards per carry. And of course, he carried the load through the Big Ten championship game and the playoff. 3.5 yards per carry this season. Donovan Edwards not a factor in the rush game. Khalil Mullings could see more carries against Washington. Michigan number 62 in the nation in rushing, but more importantly and more telling, number 72 in yards per play rushing. The rush defenses that they've faced have been stellar. Penn State is number 1 in college football at 2.2 yards per carry. I'm looking at yards per carry here. Nebraska at number 6, Iowa 10, Maryland at number 20, Ohio State at number 22 against the run. In the showdown against Penn State, Michigan ran it, of course, 32 consecutive times in protecting a lead and in protecting their offensive line. 227 yards rushing for Michigan, again in running the ball over and over and over and over at 4.9 yards per carry. 2.7 yards per carry, better than what Penn State gives up against the rest of the schedule. Excellent effort by the Wolverines against Penn State. Against Nebraska, 4.9 yards per carry against the 6th best rushing defense statistically in the nation. They could not move it, though, against Iowa. 66 yards on the ground, 1.9 yards per carry. Of course, all these rushing statistics include sack yardage. Against Maryland, 150 yards, but just 3.3 yards per carry. And against Ohio State, Michigan could not run it against the Buckeyes for about 3+ quarters, then broke free in the fourth quarter, wore down the Buckeyes for 156 yards rushing, 4 yards even per carry. Then in the college football playoff game at the Rose Bowl against Bama, the 33rd ranked rush defense in the country, Michigan hit them up for 130 yards, so did not dominate up front in the rushing game, but 4.1 yards per carry against Bama's a solid statistic. J.J. McCarthy brings that dual threat ability, of course, for Michigan. J.J. had 2 key runs against Bama. I believe that it would be in Michigan's best interest not to run JJ 15 or 18 times, but to run him a few times early, loosen up the defense, make them respect his rushing threat. Blake Corum, 21-yard touchdown run late against Bama that won the game, puffed up the stats, 19 carries for 83 yards, up until that point about 3 yards per carry for Corum against Alabama. There is no way that Washington can hold up against the Michigan run game. Let's see what the Huskies did this season overall, and again, most importantly, against the best rushing teams in the Pac-12. Washington, a pretty respectable number 43 in the nation in rush defense. However, let's look a little deeper. 2 factors here. 86th in yards per carry against is awful. However, this Washington Huskies defense beat up with injuries throughout most of the season, got healthy late. That was one of the reasons why they're in this game right now. The best rushing offenses Washington has faced. Oregon is number 3 in the nation at 5.9 yards per carry, and they took it to Washington pretty well. 204 yards at 5.1 yards per carry the first time they played in Seattle. And then in the Pac-12 championship game, Oregon only 124 yards rushing, but 6.2 yards per rush. A lot of that coming from Bo Nix. Why didn't they run it more? Well, Washington got up by 3 scores, and Oregon had to throw it. So it took the run game out of play, but the Ducks ran it well against the Huskies twice. Oregon State, one of the top rushing offenses in college football over the past couple seasons, number 26 in the nation, ran for 148 yards against the Huskies at 3.7 yards per carry. So a respectable showing by Washington, but of course the Oregon State pass threat is not great. USC, the pass threat is great, and the Trojans ran all over the Huskies and scoring 42 points at the Coliseum. The USC rush offense is number 31 in the nation, 203 yards, 7.5 yards per carry. And then we see the effort from Boise State. Let's not forget the Broncos. Washington pulled away in what was a close game for about a half in routing Boise State 56-19. The Broncos, number 9 in the nation, led by Ashton Genty in rushing the football, yards per carry. And there you see the numbers against Washington. Few people giving credit to the Michigan pass offense. Well, the receivers are marginal. J.J. McCarthy's inconsistent. He doesn't put up the big numbers. He went through most of November not throwing a touchdown pass until the one against Ohio State. However, Michigan, let's look at the pass efficiency, not the compilation of numbers. Teams that throw the ball all over the place are going to put up more yardage. But more important than the yardage is the pass efficiency. It measures TD to pick ratio, yards per pass completion, yards per attempt. All the figures factor in to the efficiency rating. And Michigan's number 5 in the nation. 24 touchdowns, 5 picks from J.J. McCarthy. Of course, his kryptonite is Bowling Green, and I don't believe the Falcons are going to be playing in the national championship game. Against Bama, the number 27 pass defense in the nation, J.J. hit for 17 of 27 for 221 and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He threw what could have been a costly interception on the very first play of the game. So from a stat perspective, that a bit of a gift. J.J. could have thrown an interception, really did throw an interception from a playing standpoint, as Caleb Downs was out of bounds by about a quarter of an inch. But a really good game from J.J. McCarthy, although he did miss a few passes, and the Michigan offense went cold in the third and fourth quarters. Best pass defenses statistically on Michigan's schedule. Ohio State, number 2, and J.J. McCarthy was razor sharp. Only threw it 20 times, but 16 completions, and that unworldly throw that he made against double coverage for Michigan's second touchdown. Against Iowa, the 4th-rated pass efficiency defense that Michigan faced this year, 22 of 30, 147 through the air for J.J. McCarthy. So good completion percentage, but not much yardage against the Hawkeyes. Penn State, number 11 in the nation in pass efficiency defense. And what a secondary Penn State brought to the table. And we know the story of the Michigan-Penn State game. Michigan got the lead. They knew they could run the ball to a certain extent, try to protect their offense and offensive line. So they only threw it 8 times, but J.J. went 7 of 8 for 60 yards in that game against Penn State. Maryland, surprisingly, with the 12th best pass efficiency defense in the nation, performed the best against Michigan and J.J. McCarthy. McCarthy, an off day, 12 of 23, was hobbling around with a bad knee, 141 yards, and threw a bad pick at the end of the first half that kept the Terps in the game. And then against Michigan, a really workmanlike, efficient performance from J.J. against the 14th-ranked pass efficiency defense out of Nebraska, 12 of 16 for $156, 2 touchdowns and no picks for J.J. against Nebraska. The Pac-12 has the best quarterbacks in college football. Therefore, the Pac-12 has the best pass offenses in college football with some of the great receiver units at the top, Washington, of course. So you would think the statistics would suffer greatly, but Washington held up pretty well considering. The Huskies, number 32 in the nation in pass efficiency defense. They gave up 23 touchdowns, but picked the ball off 16 times. They faced these pass offenses. They had 4 games against top 10 pass offenses. Oregon, number 2 in the nation. Bo Nix went 33 of 44 in Seattle for 337 yards. In the Pac-12 championship game, he had the ball less. Therefore, he was not able to convert as the Huskies kept the Ducks off the field, and Oregon trailed much of that game, 21 of 34 for 239. Put the games together, and Bo Nix went for 5 touchdowns and 1 pick against Washington. Caleb Williams, Heisman Trophy winner in 2022, and USC's number 3 ranked pass offense Williams, 27 of 35 for 312 and 3 touchdowns, ripped up the Huskies pretty well in keeping USC in the game, but Washington grabbed a lead by 1 or 2 scores, and USC was trailing most of the night. Arizona played a respectable game in Tucson before we knew how good the Wildcats were. 10th best passing offense in college football when it was all said and done. Jaden DeLora got hurt. Noah Fafita came in, and before we knew how good he was going to be, hit up the Huskies for 27 of 39, 232, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick in a relatively close game. The score would indicate a little bit closer than it actually was, as Washington won 31-24. And then, of course, the college football playoff game against Quinn Ewers and Texas, the 21st rated pass efficiency offense in the country. But let's consider Ewers missed some substantial time. I'm sure that brought down Texas's overall rating. So Ewers better than number 21, certainly. 24 of 43 against Washington, 318 yards, a touchdown, and no picks in the playoff game, in which Texas scored 31 points. And, of course, they were gunning toward the end zone to put up 38 and the win. Washington's a pass-first offense. We all know that. But you got to be able to run the ball to a certain extent to keep the defense honest. And it might surprise some people that Dylan Johnson had an outstanding season with over 1,100 yards rushing, and Washington ran it well this season. But Dylan Johnson and company could not run it against that Texas front seven. And the Texas rush defense, one of the best in the nation, as is Michigan. Dylan Johnson only 21 carries, 49 yards against the Horns. Washington rushing the football. Again, yards per carry, more important than total yards. Number 55 in the nation at 4.4 yards per rush. Let's focus on Tybo Rogers. He had 5 carries against Texas as he relieved Dylan Johnson at 1 point, 17-yard run against the Horns. Dylan Johnson, again, had a rough night against Texas, but ran for 1,162 yards this season. The best rush defenses that Washington faced, there they are. Texas at number 5. Dylan Johnson, 21 for 49. The Huskies total, 31 carries, 102 yards, 3.3 yards per carry. Michael Penix added into that figure. 2 games against an Oregon rush defense that was number 27 in the nation. In the first game in Seattle, Washington ran for just shy of 100 yards, 4.3 yards per carry. Then 157 in the conference championship game in Vegas at 4.2 yards per carry. Dylan Johnson had a $152 against the Ducks, so an excellent rushing performance behind that Joe Mora winning offensive line against the Ducks' 27th rated rush defense. Oregon State at number 28 in the nation, just 1 spot back of Oregon. And in that 22-20 Washington win, they ran for 110 yards at 4.4 yards per carry. Dylan Johnson, 16 for 89 against the Beavs. And then finally, another top 30 rush defense, Arizona in Tucson. DJ ran for 16 for 91, 111 total yards for Washington against Arizona. Another respectable showing in yards per carry at 4.3. So Washington can run the football. Can they run it against Michigan, though? Wolverines had the 7th best rushing defense in the nation in yards per carry against it, 3 flat. Penn State, though, was the best rushing offense statistically that Michigan faced. Penn State statistically was the best rush offense that Michigan faced. And Penn State certainly had issues throughout the season on offense and didn't support the run game with a strong pass game. They ran it pretty well against Michigan, 164 yards at 4.7 yards per carry. Not statistically in yards per carry the most successful, as we will see in a second, but I believe Penn State ran the ball better against Michigan than anybody else. UNLV, surprisingly, the 2nd best rush offense statistically. Of course, they're facing a Mountain West schedule. 49th in the country, and they only ran for 61 yards and 2 yards per carry against Michigan as they got trounced in that game. And Nebraska at number 53 in the nation. Much of that produced because they can't throw the ball, so they run the ball all the time. But 5 yards per carry against Michigan at 106 yards, but they trailed much of that game big early. And Ohio State, we got to throw the Buckeyes in there just because the game is the game, and Ohio State's as good as they are. They would have ranked higher, no doubt, if Travion Henderson would have been healthy the entire season. So Michigan faced the best version of the Buckeyes running game, and Ohio State ran for 107 yards at 3.8 per carry. Generally couldn't run the ball at all in the first half. got a couple drives going in the third quarter when they got back in the ball game running the football. But again, Michigan held them to 3.8 yards per carry. Now we get to the heavy hitters. The Washington pass offense, with arguably the best quarterback in the game, certainly on top of his game against Texas, as he ripped up the horns as many expected. And he's got 3 NFL wide receivers. Let's look at Washington's offense. Passing the football. Number 11 in pass efficiency. So number 1 in yardage, because they throw it a lot and they throw it deep. They throw for chunk yardage. So in the comparison for the Heisman Trophy between Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, we would see that Penix completion percentage not the equal of Nix or Daniels, but he throws it deep so much. 37 touchdowns, 10 picks for Washington, and again, 11th in efficiency. These are the best pass defenses that Washington faced. Oregon, number 13 in the nation. And Penix in those 2 games completed 49 of 76 passes for 621 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And more importantly, of course, pulled out the wins against the Ducks and completed the passes when it meant something, just like he did against Texas. Arizona, number 43 in the nation in pass efficiency defense. Penix went 30 of 40 for 363 and no touchdowns against the Wildcats. Against Texas this past Monday night, Penix 29 of 38, 430 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And that's a meaningful stat when you consider he put it up 38 times against one of the great front sevens and a very talented secondary. Maybe have some issues, but talented, and no interceptions. And then against Washington State in that narrow Apple Cup victory, it was one of Penix's poorer performances of the season statistically. 18 of 33, 204, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick against Wazoo's number 51 pass defense. Can't wait to see the 2 corners of Michigan, Will Johnson and Mike Sanders-Still. Possibly the best tandem in the country. I believe they are. I named them Big Ten Co-Defensive Players of the Year here at the Voice of College Football against those wide receivers. And of course, Washington's going to try to create some mismatches against the rest of the secondary. But man, Johnson and Sanders-Still, one of the great reasons, of course, that Michigan is so good against the pass. And also we saw it on display against Alabama, especially in the first half, that Michigan pass rush can be devastating. Michigan's pass defense, number 3 in the nation, 7 touchdowns. They only gave up 7 touchdowns all year, 16 interceptions. Now, Bama actually had the best pass efficiency offense that Michigan faced at number 12 in the nation, although Michigan really held them down. Again, the pass rush was devastating, overwhelming Jalen Milroe for much of that game. 16 of 23 is not bad, but only 116 yards. Actually, these next 2 teams threw the ball the best against Michigan. And especially considering both games were close, that these pass completions and the yardage are meaningful. Ohio State 17th in the nation in pass efficiency. Kyle McCord hit Michigan for some chunk plays. He put up 271 yards passing on 18 of 30, 2 touchdowns as well. So consider Michigan only gave up 7 passing touchdowns all year, and Kyle McCord had 2, but he threw the 2 costly picks. Same thing here to a certain extent with Maryland and Talia Tagovailoa. 49th in the nation in pass efficiency offense. He threw 2 costly picks against Michigan. However, otherwise, he hit on some big plays that kept Maryland in a close game, 21 of 31 for 247. So Michigan can be had by the right receivers and the right quarterback. Of course, the key to the whole thing is how much time Michael Penix has to throw. Turnover margin is crucial. It always is. That will always be the case in college football. In football, period. Turnover margin predicts about 85% correctly. And Michigan is number 1 in college football, plus 17. Washington just over break-even mark at plus 2, 49th in the country. Penalties. Michigan, again, like the turnovers, does not hurt itself. Number 1 in the nation, committing just 2.9 penalties per game. Washington commits almost 3 times as many penalties per game as Michigan at number 127 in college football. Now, if it comes down to a late field goal, both teams should be in good shape. Should be. Michigan, of course, had its special teams nightmares against Alabama, but still survived the muffed punt. The botched snap on the PAT, and of course, a missed field goal. Michigan 16 of 19 on the season. Washington, Gabe Gross at 16 of 20. When you size it all up, Michigan can run the football, but not nearly as well as they did in 21 and 22 because of offensive line issues, and also Donovan Edwards not being the back that he was in 22. Texas was running the ball against Washington. Michigan needs to do the same. Michigan will commit to the run. Texas did not, despite their two top backs, C.J. Baxter and Jadon Blue, averaging 6.5 or 7 yards per carry. They got away and got pass happy. Michigan will not. They'll stick with the run. And, of course, those cornerbacks for Michigan I expect to be a big factor in this game. Even the best cornerbacks in the country can't be expected for 4 and 5 and 6 seconds to chase around the best wide receivers in the nation. However, they will be able to do it more often than other cornerback tandems in the nation. We will have our prediction on Michigan-Washington coming up here very soon. Would love to get your perspective on the stats breakdown right here at the Voice of College Football.